The few moments we will spend together probably will not be as entertaining as Bill and Ted's excellent adventure, but hopefully it won't be as long or as silly. We're only going to talk for 10 minutes, and we are going to talk about a mission that Child supports named SAHARA, which is the opposite of silly. It's profound, important, life-saving.
This year, on February 15th, we started our long trek to South Africa. We drove to Calgary with Anne-Marie Dole and Kathy Short to fly for 25 hours to South Africa, and there we were going to meet Gerhard Reuter and Estelle Reuter. We were very unaware of what we would experience, much of which was well past our comfort zone, but all of which has contributed significantly to our life.
We spent the first few days sightseeing in Cape Town, a truly beautiful city where the ocean and mountains meet under spectacular sunshine. The few days there gave us a chance to get over jet lag and get reacquainted with Anya Reuter. Stan and I last saw her as a teenager leaving Edmonton to go to South Africa. She is now an accomplished doctor with a family of her own. Seeing Anya so well settled in South Africa was a highlight of our trip.
From Cape Town, we headed off to a little community called George, 5 or so hours away, to experience the real purpose of our trip. The drive to George, and in fact any driving through South Africa, was well past my comfort zone, and for me as a driver and for anyone who was riding with me. As I was driving, I had Estelle's voice in my head telling me to make sure I kept my doors locked, don't stop for false policemen, as if I was going to be able to identify which one's the false one and which one's the real one, and stay on the correct side of the road, which is always a bit of a problem for me. She didn't even mention the caution of not running over the penguins.
Our Airbnb was a 10-minute drive from the city of George. It was a lovely place, very much like our homes in Canada. However, when we checked into the house, we were told the alarm system in the house had been discontinued and there was no longer a security firm retained to monitor the house. We were surprised at how much it concerned us. Our first night, we laid awake considering our options for escape if there was a home invasion. The Reuters had forewarned us of the safety risks throughout South Africa, but Cape Town had felt much like Canada. But now, in this more remote part of South Africa, we were becoming more aware we were not home. The first trip to George only raised that awareness to a whole new level.
Part of what was overwhelming going into George was driving into what has historically been called a township, but now is referred to as an informal settlement. Even that name misses the mark, for this place is not informal. It's a lifetime home for many people, approximately 11.5 million people in South Africa. We had seen these areas, or seen areas like this in other parts of the world, but never had driven into those areas. People were on the street and traffic seemed heavy. The rules of the road seemed somehow had changed. All of this was not just scary. It was also sobering to think of the need that was so apparent to those around us.
We drove into George to attend the clinic where SAHARA offered its services. SAHARA stands for Smoking and Alcohol Harms Alleviation and Rehabilitation Association. It's an organization that helps people in various communities reduce the harm to themselves, their families, and their communities by reducing their use of alcohol, tobacco, and drugs. It does this by providing both information and medicine. It is the combination of these two services that makes SAHARA's approach to substance use rather unique. The child directors were familiar with the organization and had provided financial support to assist with purchasing medicine and paying for operating costs. They were there to ensure that what they understood was consistent with what was happening. For us, it was all new and more than just a little bit overwhelming.
SAHARA operates throughout the week at a number of different clinics. The clinic we pulled up to, in contrast to the houses around it, was a large and modern facility. Services are provided there for acute care, chronic conditions, and family support during the first 1,000 days of life. We walked into the clinic that had hundreds of people lined up for a wide range of services. The SAHARA services were actually only part of what was happening at the clinic that day. We were then ushered to a meeting room for our first session.
What I was impressed with was the professionalism and care that was demonstrated by those who led this group. The facilitator, A person named Nakwanda was very talented. She drew people into participation with a welcoming smile, gentle persuasion, and effortless enthusiasm. The group consisted of a mix of service users, primarily individuals seeking help for nicotine and alcohol addictions, and us Canadians. After a time of getting to know each other, the main topic of discussion was the importance of having a structured plan to avoid triggers which would lead to substance use. We were pleased with how often attending a church group was seen by the participants as a healthy option to build into their weekly lives. All of this was happening in 3 different languages with various people, including the Reuters, translating for us unilingual Canadians.
There were people there who had been there many times and others who were first-timers. Each participant shared their reason for attending and their desire for assistance. The experienced participants drew alongside those who were new, demonstrating their own vulnerability and encouraging the new people to tell their own story. A fellow named X helped with the games, storytelling, and translation. He was a participant leader, struggled with use of alcohol himself, which was interfering with his hopes of being a good dad and pursuing a dream of organizing drama schools.
After the training session, people individually had an opportunity to sit down with Dr. Herman Reuter and Dr. Anya Reuter for a private session where their situation was discussed and medicine was provided. In one of those situations, a man had come from Tanzania, 4,000 kilometers away, to a nearby town and then hitchhiked to George in the hope that he would speak to a doctor and get the medicine that might help him with his substance use. He was not in the program. Technically, they should have turned him away, but they didn't. Compassion won that day.
Sessions like we experienced happen regularly at that site and at 7 other sites. Another support group we attended at another site was a smaller group with maybe 5 or 6 people led by Angie, the lady in the green, and a matron. Angie was a social worker who had been with SAHARA since its conception. She too was loving and compassionate, skilled at communicating and drawing people into participation.
A profound part of our time there was hearing the story of John. Oh, for pity's sakes. John was a former warden of a prison who was dealing with alcohol use. He had a relapse the weekend prior to our meeting at a family wedding. Others in the group encouraged him to put that behind him, to refocus. Most vocal with his encouragement was a fellow who had been a prisoner in the same prison that John had been a warden in. Substance use is a great equalizer. All of us are at risk. All of us can offer compassion and hope. During our 3 days in George, we went to a methadone clinic near the downtown area and sat in on another support group. The session was in a very small room with 15 or so of us. Herman led this group, with each of the 10 attendees telling about their week. For the benefit of us Canadians, they told more of their story than what they may have normally. It was profound, to say the least. This could be any of us or any of our children. It felt we were only 1 or 2 circumstances and 1 or 2 bad decisions away from the same situation. They talked about the utter despair they felt before getting on the SAHARA program, the elation they felt when they were told they could join, and the challenges they were facing to stay on the program, find work, and begin a new way of living. We met Brian there, who you see on the slide. Yeah. A man who went out on the street at the break of dawn to find program participants and provide them with the day's medication, because giving them a week's worth would just lead them into problems. The compassion of Herman and Brian was moving, as was the compassion shown by the participants to each other.
Much of what we've been talking about and what we saw was in response to the desperate need. But reacting to substance use once the proverbial cat is out of the bag and the damage is done is costly and difficult. Approximately $20 billion is lost due to alcohol in South Africa, and that's only the monetary cost. To be proactive, SAHARA advocates for better legislation to control alcohol and drug distribution. And SAHARA has adopted a program that comes out of Iceland called Planet Youth, a program which makes families and youth aware of the danger of substance use and to provide positive alternatives. there are three key pillars to the Planet Youth program.
The first pillar is to be evidence-based. Surveys are conducted with youth in the community on a biannual basis to glean what is happening and how can the youth be redirected before substance use becomes part of their world. Surveys indicate that more than a third of children between grade 8 and grade 11 admit to binge drinking. The problem starts early.
The second pillar is community-based. Since family structures are seen as part of the solution, the program does whatever it can to buoy up the family, encourages meals together, positive interactions, and parental involvement in their children's lives.
The third pillar is to be school-based. All of this happens within the school. In South Africa, there is a program for young adults called Year Beyond. These young people are called Yebaneers. I didn't think I was going to be able to say that. Yebaneers. Planet Youth has connected with this program and made arrangements for 50 Yebaneers to join the program and go out into the schools in George and make a positive impact. The session we watched was Planet Youth leaders training Yebaneers. Again, the leadership was first rate, showing insight and creativity that was beyond excellent.
We saw this plaque, the one on the left, on a wall in a church we visited in George. The translation is on the right. How profoundly true that is. And after what we saw in George, we cannot help but think that the future in South Africa is looking brighter, thanks to SAHARA and Planet Youth. Here are our 4 takeaways, which we leave with you.
The SAHARA treatment makes a difference in people's lives. We cannot be presumptuous enough to say that it fully works, as we don't have long-term data. But we have anecdotal evidence of lives changed for the better when they participate and change for the worse when they don't.
In our trip there, we saw once again just how beautiful compassion is. The people who are delivering the services are committed, creative, skilled, well-trained, and compassionate, like Cindy there on the right. We also saw the child directors show compassion. They were there to fulfill their fiduciary duty to child supporters like you. And yet, at all times, they went out of their way to encourage the workers and the participants.
There is hope. As mentioned by Dawn in the report from Haiti and India, there is hope. When our kids were little, we would listen to a Stephen Curtis Chapman tape, and just before he sang a song, there was a reverberating recording of Billy Graham saying, "Where is the hope? Where is the hope?" The hope is in Haiti and in India and in South Africa. Really, we believe it is wherever God is, which is all those places, and here as well.
And finally, we feel privileged to be part of it. Not just being on a trip like that, but being able to support child. This is one way we too can be compassionate and participate in the hope that the future holds for all of us.